Here.
No, that's right. Hi, Jake. Up the wrong tree if I come and propose this. And they said, well, if we have the money, you don't see a problem. But it was not, if they didn't sign up. That's what we needed somebody to go with portfolio. They need to sign up. Who did? So, all right. Well, I already called.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. It is 1 o'clock. This is the regularly scheduled December BET meeting. Roll call by primary members, except the assessor. Marcy's here. Okay, everybody's present. Notice the meeting was properly posted on December 9th, 2024. Item number 1, discussion possible action regarding the minutes of November 12th.
So moved.
Second.
You got a motion second to approve the minutes of November 12th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item 2, discussion possible action regarding any items currently on BET watch list. Anything on here? Anybody wants to talk about it this time? If not, we can always come back to it if we need to later. So no action needed on item number 2 at this time. Item 3, discussion possible action regarding an update on employee benefits. Mr. Wilkerson.
Just a real quick, as of tomorrow, this is a snapshot of where we're at. Claims fluctuate from week to week, month to month. But so far, through tomorrow, medical's up about 4%, prescriptions are down about 3%, overall about 1%, which is really good for any health plan. As a reminder, we budgeted about a 6% increase, and we're not there at all. If you go down to the bottom with reimbursements, we're only about 1% over where we were this time last year. So, and that's with about 6 months, so about half a year. Good books, doing good.
So we got some slack if I need to have a computer.
Yes, please feel free.
Patient zero. Good job, John.
All right, everything's looking good. John, I was going to mention, I know we changed the process this year, so you're front funded on the employer share on general fund budgets. You would kind of keep an eye, and you may already be doing this, but on cash accounts to make sure that our cash flow revenue that's coming in is close to what was projected. That way, we saw
Are
that.
we invoicing the cash?
Yeah.
How we're doing?
Yeah. They pay for those. So the biggest chunk was the general fund accounts, and we took care of that. I'm just asking that we keep an eye on the cash accounts too, make sure that we're not short on those.
There was, I think the first 3 months until the budget was finalized, that 3% employer increase, it automatically comes from payroll for special revenue funds, but it took about 3 months for that to get approved, that increase in employer funds. So it's a pretty small amount. I think it's like $30,000. It needs to be paid out of special revenue funds. So I probably need to get with finance to see how we can collect that.
Okay.
But I'll watch the others for sure.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Anything else? Anybody have anything for John? Okay, if not, do we have a motion to receive the report?
So moved.
We got a motion and a second to receive the report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All ayes and 1 no. Motion passes. Item 3, discuss, study, and make possible recommendations to the budget board regarding the county's plan to build a new jail. What was the original intent of this item again?
Well, I have a lot I can say on it, but I think time is better spent talking about tea. I just moved to skip it for this month.
Okay. No action on item 4 unless does anybody else want to talk about it? Okay. Item 5, discuss, study, partnering with the Criminal Justice Authority and make possible recommendations to the budget board regarding CJA's efforts to implement and assume full operational responsibility for providing medical services to detainees. We need to remove it.
And I don't have any other stuff. I don't have anything new on that unless somebody else does.
Well, the biggest issue,
Then they're going to an RFP. I mean, I know that was approved this week, last week.
I don't know, in the jail trust meeting yesterday, they said they're not interested in malpractice insurance.
That's what I'd say if you can't find it. I mean, I might just go, well, it's my idea and say, well, you don't want it anyway, but But I know they're going for-
the individuals. And
That's
doing
what
like
I
a
understand.
reimbursement, or has that plan changed?
not that I know of. But they're, I guess, going for an RFP to see if they can find something that's even remotely reasonable to hire it done.
And they've got $800,000 in savings that they've identified. But
Well, that's not any good if it's savings. That's one time
What
money.
I heard in the jail trust is that they were advised by counsel not to seek.
Not the what?
They were advised by counsel not to seek malpractice insurance.
That I don't know. I mean,
That's what they said. in the meeting.
but I'm
Not
curious
to see.
from,
I didn't hear you.
I think it was not to seek.
I was at the budget board meeting and that was the verbiage that they used.
The jail trust.
Yeah, yesterday at 1 o'clock.
What language did Mr. I forget his name? It was their budget director,
for sure.
Sherman, say.
He's due here in a few minutes.
Okay. Good to have you.
At least my interest in having some of these things on here is for us to keep track of what the county's potential legal and financial exposure is, since we don't live on an island. And that's a big one, is the med mal, and if they can't get a good operation set up, it sounds like they have on a day-to-day basis, put together a sufficient operation to care for the detainees, but
Okay, well, if Mr. Sherman's on his way, what Rick said is kind of concerning to me. I don't know about anybody else, but it sounds like that may or may not have been said. So let's go ahead and wait to have further discussion on this until he's here to clarify.
Yeah, actually,
Well, Rick, you said that, and somebody else had asked me the exact same question, almost the exact same as you did. So I don't think you're the only one that thinks that. I was not able to attend or watch,
yeah.
and I was like,
I did a transcript of it. It's up in my office.
okay. All right. Well, we will come back to item number 5 shortly. Item number 6, discussion possible action regarding a recommendation to the budget board to raise the salaries of the sheriff, district 2 commissioner, and the court clerk. So correspond with the already approved FY25 budget to equalize that one portion with other elected officials. This amount is to be retroactive to July 1, 2024. I think we'd already put these monies in the budget. I think we just need to, budget board needs to take action. So kind of self-explanatory. Any discussion?
but this is
It's on the agenda. The budget.
Yeah. But if we pass this, then it'll be a recommendation from us as well. So I think it's pretty important that all the elected officials are on the same pay for the year. So
this is just for the ad valorem portion. So it's not, we don't have a problem with before their current term, the new term is okay.
And for clarification, this is not to raise the elected officials up to the total amount.
Right,
This
I
is
got you.
by far.
Right.
So, yeah,
it's just that one piece.
yeah, it's just the first group where the 3 were.
Because statutorily, we can't do the other part, but the part that statutorily we can equalize should be.
Yes. I just want to make sure that was clear on the record.
Is there a motion on item 6?
So moved.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to recommend the budget board the adjustment of the salaries
I'm sorry.
to the
Who seconded?
I did. The statutory limits allowed. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. All right, Mr. Sherman is here now, so let's go ahead and walk back to item number 5. This is regarding the jail taking on the full operational responsibility for providing medical services to detainees. Mr. Buchanan had a question about a statement in the meeting yesterday. Rick, do you want to go ahead?
Well, you said something, where are you, sir?
I'm right here, I'm sorry.
You said something, you were advised, it was item 10, you were advised by council, it was in regards to medical malpractice.
Yes, and since our council is the same council as yours, I would suggest that the BET meet with them to get the same information that they gave us as far as medical malpractice insurance goes.
Can you reiterate what you said yesterday in the meeting as best as you can?
Yes, so essentially what we were told was that the amount of the premium that we would pay for medical malpractice insurance for the amount that we can get isn't going to cover the majority of the lawsuits we get. So if it's $15 million and we're paying $1 million a year in a premium and we're only getting $5 million or $3 million coverage, it doesn't make financial sense to do that. That's
But that sounds like a policy question. I'm confused how council would advise on policy and not legal. Because that's what we're always told, is that we don't get advice on policy issues, it's on legal. And I don't know.
Well, you were,
Valid point.
contextually, I think you were saying about 800,000 because of the changes and all that, and I think people were thinking, well, that could cover malpractice. I think that was kind of.
sure. And we are currently projecting a savings for this FY about 800,000 from the medical standpoint, from things that we were paying for with turnkey, but we weren't really getting. So we're now in a position where our medical is actually more robust than it was before when we had turnkey.
Chris,
So
on that 800,000, so has the number changed what you think it'll cost to run medical? From the number that you provided last time was like 7.2 or 3, if I remember correctly, and budget was 8.8. So that's a difference of 1.5. So has the number changed on what you think it'll cost to run medical?
we don't have enough information yet since we took over on 1010.
Okay.
We're waiting to kind of get that information, and part of it is also to that point is that right now medical's not fully staffed, so we're paying a pretty significant portion of overtime. Where once we get that staffed up, that overtime should hopefully go away as well.
Okay.
So that would be more savings that we would realize at that point.
So if you think that there's gonna be $800,000 savings, so then right now you think an all-in medical cost will be closer to 8 million rather than like that 7.3 or whatever. Is that
Correct? Yes.
Okay.
Right now. Now, again, once we start getting more information as far as the actual billings go, it'll be easier for us to discern what that number is going to be going forward.
And kind of back to Rick's question too, on the med mal, does that only apply to, again, I don't know the appropriate term, but does that only apply to like a general blanket policy, or are you still going to provide malpractice for the providers themselves, or is that just malpractice as a whole?
It's as a whole.
Okay.
So
Okay.
and that's my understanding.
And that's
Now,
why I understood it from the meeting yesterday, but I wasn't sure.
and that's the way I understand it as well.
Okay.
What do you mean as a whole?
Like there won't be malpractice at all for providers.
The providers have their own.
Oh, they will. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The providers have their own medical malpractice insurance.
But the county doesn't, nor does the jail trust.
That's correct.
That's right.
To your point, Cody, is that because it is policy, is that something perhaps the commissioners want to take it?
I don't know about that. I think that, I appreciate the point. I mean, you got to look at an expense versus, what you're going to get out of it. But I think that's an analysis that needs to be, looked at and not just assumed, I guess. And I'm not saying that you guys have done that. It's just we haven't been privy to some of that information over here. So it's just, and it is a little bit of a different scenario if your providers are covered. So there is malpractice insurance
Yes, the provider.
in place. I was concerned that we were talking about a situation to where there was no coverage, period.
And I'm sorry if that's my fault. I probably should have clarified that, so.
So on that budget that you submitted on the malpractice line, you had 100,000. So that'll be for the provider's portion that you're
Yes.
paying? Okay. Because y'all will still pay for that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
And those are solid numbers you have, because I know at one point when we were talking about it, they were still all in discussion, didn't know exactly what those expenses were going to be. Those are known expenses now for the provider side.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, if your council thinks there's information that we need, maybe just ask your council to talk to us.
Hear your counsel.
I know, I'm just being silly. He's sitting back there in the corners. He's trying to see a smile. Actually, I was trying to see if she was going to throw something. All right. Any other discussions on this item?
Anybody have any questions though, especially as far as the operations go or anything along that line? I brought Donna who runs medical for us, so if anybody has any questions about how we're proceeding or how that's going, we'd be happy to answer those questions if anybody has any.
Well, I'll say from my perspective, I don't have any interest in running the jail, but from where I sit, I'm always interested in what the county's legal and financial exposure is based on not just the criminal justice authority, but anything going on in the county. So this is a big ticket item, so to speak, that's kind of an unprecedented change. This with medical and anything else related to insurance or whatever that could leave the county exposed. We have a keen interest in, I think, and would appreciate any information you guys have to just help us keep track of that.
Anything we can provide, we'd be happy to. So.
I will ask, I apologize, I didn't have a chance to attend or watch the meeting yesterday. I'm sure I probably would know the answer to this if I would have, but the RFPs, have those gone out yet?
Not yet. We have the mental health RFP that should be out today.
Okay.
Brady was reviewing to make sure we covered everything, but that should be being filed today. Now, the regular health one will probably be later in the month.
Okay.
But it's going to be this month.
Do you know how long of a period you guys are giving on those RFP responses?
I think it's 30 days is what we put on there. So,
Okay. So mid-February, you guys should probably kind of have an idea.
yes, I would say absolutely that one.
Okay. All right. Anything else for Mr. Sherman? Thanks for coming over. Appreciate it.
Don't tell. I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, it can be tough getting in this building. All right, item 7, discussion possible action regarding transition of countywide GIS staff. Under BOCC, previously determined to occur December 21, 2024. Mr. Morrison, it's your item.
Yes, I placed this item on the agenda in respect to the BT meeting that we had back on September 10th, where we talked about moving the GIS department, countywide GIS, moving it out of the assessor's office. And I watched that meeting back, and we'd state even at that meeting that we would come back here either December or January to pull an additional 6 months of funding for the 2 positions that were moving from the assessors at this point under the BLCC for that purpose. And I think that your comment was we need to address that funding. So here we are. We are at the point where we don't have the funding either in our budget to carry them any further if it doesn't go through. But more importantly is I think that that group continue to support county with all that they've been doing, building all the pieces of GIS for all the different groups, for all the different commissioners, emergency management. I think they're beginning to take on a more vital role. We saw some of that in reaction to the storms we had back in November. It's been a very big key point of the building. But what we've identified from our office, we've identified portions of our budget that will follow that move. And that move is taken. It's just that there is no funding for 6 months of salary for each of those individuals.
What's the total number?
It's 88, yeah. 88,000. A little bit more than 88,000.
I'm assuming item 7 and 9 are related.
No, not really.
Mine's the rest of it.
Yeah, there is some with that, but no, this is more about just funding those two positions to continue to support the countywide GIS.
Where are they
Well,
budgeted
but-
now?
They're under our budget. Under us,
Your general fund budget?
one is general, one is.
How do we have people that don't have?
When we did our budget, we did the 6 month. Yeah, and it was the same thing of the flat budget. Previous year that we adopted. So. I think that's what we talked about in the September 18.
So for item 7, you need 88,000.
There's 88,000 needed either.
So
to
item
keep the program through us or to migrate it where it needs to go.
Yeah, item 7 and item 8, I understand the confusion there. Item 8 is regarding budget approval for the second half of the fiscal year. So it does appear that it would be,
Item 8 is.
or I'm sorry, item 9.
It is
Item 9.
For reasons that Tim and I have already discussed, item 9 was completely inaccurately worded for the item, so if we need to strike that for now, we can.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I was meaning 7 and 9. But anyway.
So they're not the same thing.
No, they're not.
Yeah, 9, I think, is more related to a asset management type system that we
Should have
looked
been.
at when we were out at the history conference, was speaking to some folks. There's a really, really cool program that we can utilize countywide that amount that's on there is like an implementation cost and software. And then after we get everything implemented, the software is, like $35,000 a year for the entire county to be able to utilize. So I think, coming back and having some discussion on that later is going to be extremely important. It's a really cool program, but we can't really do that with that particular wording. But 7 is just to address whether, we're going to continue on with what we had talked about, which was a move from your office under the BOCC, and then if there's additional funding needed to be able to go to pay for that.
That's what we talked about in September, that you would be back here in December, January to ask for funding once those supplemental funds were in. That's what we need.
But that's never put on the watch list.
That was.
That was a good idea.
I'm sorry?
That was a good idea. Have a watch list for stuff like that.
Well, what is this one? It works when it works.
That's the contract with Ezra, right? That's a different deal. The one that's.
That's already been done.
Okay, so on item 7, what this is asking to do is to transfer Tim and another person to the BOCC, take them out from under the assessor's office, and then transfer associated funding with those two for salaries and benefits.
Not necessarily a transfer.
No, you don't have the money, that's what you're saying.
It's only
Transfer with
approved
each
the first
funding
Well,
out.
transfer.
I think, Mike, when you said transfer, I think, were you meaning next fiscal year, you guys?
No, we've identified things that are
Okay.
associated in that budget for GIS that would follow that program wherever it goes. It would include some capital, some the credits for Esri training, travel, those types of things that.
But you guys also had some general fund dollars that you utilized the first part of this year, right? For that. The next fiscal year, we would be able to not put that into your budget beginning the year. We would be able to put that wherever they want. Correct. Right.
So when would this take, when would you want this change effect?
Well, we had proposed that it would take place January. That was
January 1st.
September. We were thinking December 21st payroll would be easier transfer, making that happen. Proposal was to carry Tim 3 months in our reval and 9 months have him do more assessor work as well. But I'm at the point that I don't have any funds, so we've actually gone longer than what we talked about in September. But if the program stays with us or if it moves, that's the money that's still needed to cover the salaries for that point. To get us through fiscal. Fiscal.
So what is the amount needed?
88.
88? 7.
And that's 6 months, right?
For those two.
And so next month, for next year, it'd be double that? Or you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Under BOCC, what department would they go under?
There's,
They could do their own.
yeah, I
There'd be
think,
more to set up to make it happen.
yeah,
I wonder if they'd have to go under.
I think we talked to MIS and, I've bantered about engineering as well in the past, but I think either of those two locations would be pretty good. I don't know about with it currently being a 2-person operation.
Some department.
I don't think we would put them in their own department, but put them into a different, either MIS or engineering.
We would just need to know where for our recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be okay as long as we make sure that we have dedicated those funds for those purposes and that they don't be absorbed by another entity.
Mm-hmm.
Things of that nature. I know we talked to Dane a little bit about how that would work. These conversations with us were more technical as far as what systems were coming over, what servers, what responsibility that we work through that. I think that he's a little bit more at ease with that. These individuals do that work. So at this point, if he were to move under MIS, that's what he would be doing for that. I think our concern is that we just want to make sure that the GIS group continues to support and play that vital role that it's growing. So that would be the concerns that we have. We think that things have been looking pretty well. I think they've worked with different elected officials, your group.
So how is it ensured that any GIS funding or other funding for like asset management later on down the line, how do we ensure that that stays with them rather than being absorbed?
Well, it would go into whatever department's budget, but we do line items in our budgets, all the time. So we can, for instance, just MIS, we'll use Dane as an example. When he does his budget each year, he's got a line item for subscriptions. He has a line item for, other stuff. He can have a line item for GIS, for the Esri contract and for other things. And we can, load this stuff into those specific line items.
So that was a question I was gonna have too. So would the Esri contract for the actual software itself move as well? And if so, because aren't you funded 100% for this year for that?
That has been funded in our talks with Esri.
That may stay with them.
That may stay with us, but right now, all of that is registered as the Oklahoma County assessor.
Okay.
There is talk, we've been with them for gosh, 30 years now. But, and the thing about that too is they do not do split billing. I pay a part and you guys pay another part. So Esri is really asking us to consolidate and move that to just Oklahoma County Assessor to migrate that to Oklahoma County. So that we get a new customer number, all that falls under that so that it's paid as one entity. That's kind of in our talks with them.
But for the rest of this year, we can
It's all done,
continue
yes.
the way we have been funding that. But for next fiscal year, we may need to move and that was kind of one of the things I was talking about earlier about the transfer from their budget if we move that kind of stuff. What you were paying for previously, what you would pay for going forward, we could just move that over to the whatever budget that they're under, and there could be a line item, delineating what those dollars are for.
So this just accounts for the people.
Correct.
So I mean, kind of a silly question, but computers will move with them.
Computers are
give
already
those up.
fall under, they've already been purchased last year. The only thing that I think there may be some, we don't have little things like that.
That's good.
Yeah, tablets, we have mobile devices, PCs, then they are a EPPC. They are not, they're about under $5,000 is what they cost. They're very expensive. But all of those things, and I think we've identified all of those components that move with this program if it moves out of the assessors group. So, which is some of the training. There's a portion to the cloud service, so there's money in that to support more Stellar's cloud service if it's necessary. So we've identified all those components that would go with it if it moves from the assessor's office, right?
Dane, do you have room?
Physical room?
Mm-hmm.
Probably fine. Have you been in our space lately?
Well, that's why I asked.
But you know,
But you have everybody to rotate through there. So you can not just use it like this.
we can do
Sorry.
it. Yeah, we can do it. I mean, we kick around that idea. We can do that.
That's the office version of bunk beds.
And was my statement correct in the conversations that we had? I mean, that's kind of what I got. It's been a while.
Yep.
Well, make sure that. So I will say I've had some conversations with Dane on this. I'm actually had a conversation with Mike about it as well. We've looked at in the past some of the budget that we have for our IT staff and looking at other entities, whether it's Tulsa County or whatever, the salaries and the number of employees that others have in those areas. We're not competitive, not even close. And when we look at even internally at our other departments that have IT staff, it's not really close. There was a concern, we bring, folks in, what it'll do on the, for some of the others that are in their own salary. I do think that we are going to need to revisit that in the very near future. Dane and I were discussing it the other day when I was driving down the road, and we were just spitballing numbers. I think it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $80,000 to $100,000 for their department overall, from their SE1s through their SE3s, to be able to make all of the adjustments that are going to need to be made. I think that if we make this move, we're definitely going to need, I think, to do it. Even if we don't make the move, I think it's something that we really need to do. The services and the things that group does for us from a security standpoint and keeping us up and running is vital. So it's not on here as a discussion for a recommendation or something. I'm just throwing that out there to know that that's a discussion we're going to need to have.
I know you already said it, but refresh my memory on why this was not baked into the budget already. Why we
were flat budgeted to start the year off with, and in previous years it was a split as well. So when we refunded our flat budget, we got what we got the previous year, nothing new. That's why we said we need to address this on the move.
we didn't do it in September.
We didn't do it in September. In that September meeting, we said that we would do this. this point in time, so.
Because they were paying for them for a certain portion of the year out of their special funds.
Right.
So they could go ahead and finish that, so they wouldn't have to have the money on the front end, and we could just take care of it at the transfer time.
That's, right. And did we ever discuss and choose not to put it on the punch list, or did we just not think about it? I don't, because I thought it was on here when you brought it up and I was looking for it, but there's a bunch of other stuff, but it's not that.
I don't know why we didn't put it on there. I just know when I watched the meeting, it just says, we'll talk about it in January when that time gets here. We have supplemental numbers.
So the request is for us to recommend taking from the ongoing portion of the county's reserve, $88,750 to fund the second 6 months of the current fiscal year to cover these personnel expenses.
That's what it's gonna take, yeah, either side, either they stay with us or they lose on us. That's the number.
So that's the second part of the question. We need the money regardless, but then part of the question here is, do we leave them in your office or move them to the county?
That's entirely up, I think we had talked about that. I'll still make the statement that once the baby is big enough to move out on its own, we're fine with that. We just wanted to make sure that the program was headed in the direction that it needed to be, and I think that it's proven that the success that they've seen, I think that that's the right way to take it.
But the only urgent question that needs to be addressed right now is the funding part. I mean, we're not.
And if it moves under BOCC, then U.S. commissioners will have that authority as to where you think that it needs to fall. Where that
Yeah, I don't
resides.
think our recommendation doesn't necessarily have to be what department it's going. It would just be that it's moving to a VOCC department, and a recommendation of transferring X amount of dollars from general
Because
fund
if
reserve.
they don't move and the money comes back to our budget, they will still continue to support and do the things that they are.
But to Christie's point, we'll need to be able to delineate what account it's going into. What's on the agenda for tomorrow? What account did it say?
Is there an item on the?
I don't, or no, I'm sorry.
I don't think there is an item on there.
No, I was getting confused about budget. Is there one on? I guess that'll be the next Thursday.
It's not on this afternoon.
What fund, so to come out of general fund reserve, what would it go into? If we just leave it, we don't move anything, we just fund it?
I think we've had discussions about MIS. I think we could here make the recommendation that it go to the MIS budget or another BOCC department as dictated by BOCC. So if BOCC decides that they don't want it under MIS, they want it in a different department, we could change that.
But that's assuming we would move it out of the assessor's office.
Correct.
I'm thinking about leaving it there for now, but so then it would just go to your general fund. Where, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trying to formulate a motion in my
You
head
have
here.
to put it in rebound.
Because work that Tim was doing this point forward, I can't pay it.
What would be the
We
reason
could
for
move
leaving
general
it?
fund dollars.
What's the reason for leaving it in the assessment?
Because everything's already in there. They're managed through there. It's in your office space. I mean, I don't.
I mean, do we have another, outside of like the obvious stuff, the county clerk does, is there another department that's under a single elected official that serves the entire county?
Sure.
Emergency management.
Well, that's a deal.
But emergency management's under 3 elected officials.
Which is
So. I think that's kind of an oddity. But
I guess my question would be, if budget board votes on it December 20th, and this is gonna occur the 21st, if that can all, I mean, if that's realistic and it can be done.
Mike, in your experience, where in other areas, and if you even know this, in other counties, where would a GIS department fall? Does it typically fall under the assessor?
The ones that we've dealt with, they typically start in the assessor's office, just like ours has. And then if they become big enough to support other elected officials, then they are moved either under another department, or they'll set aside a separate department, depending upon the size of it.
You have something to add, Tim?
Exactly what Mike was saying.
Oh,
Pretty much exactly what happens. You see it mainly as like a GIS department or something along those lines.
Just depends on how big of a role.
Yeah.
If it's a smaller county, then it's not gonna take that big a role, but if you're in the city of Houston, or, Harris County has its own GIS department that resides separately. It's such a large.
My concern is we've got a team hanging off the edge of a precipice here. And I don't know what the logistical considerations are with doing both of these things in one motion, trying to get it done by the end of the year. I mean, it seems I'm for limiting the challenges and getting the essential crap done right now.
Dane, what would be, I mean, transfer employees is not a huge deal. Have you guys moved computer equipment before? You did get with the assessor. Are you guys ready? Because I know there was concern about, somebody backfilling for Tim. I mean, I know we had talked about him still being.
We've had a person shadow Tim's responsibilities. They've been outlined, and that person was up and running with that. That was the whole purpose of giving us that 6-month window to get somebody prepped for that transfer. So.
Okay. So you guys, do you have extreme reservations about if we're going to move the money, whether it's into the assessors or into MIS? If that question's off the table, is it logistically, do you see any problems getting that done for this month? Do you see any? No.
What's the assessor's budget? I mean, do you have the?
Well,
I mean, not that you want to kick Tim out of the department.
no.
I know
Well, that's just it. If that were to happen, it's just a landing spot for Tim. I mean, other than that, his work is not going to be assessment related. It's just someone will be there to do his.
Well, and you did hire his replacement and train.
Yes, and we've been investing that and working.
So he would not be splitting time between assessor and county. He would go.
He would. Yeah.
Lock, stock, and barrel.
Which was kind of the reason of pulling it out of one elected official's office, because they're serving the entire county, including a lot of our BOCC departments, and so it kind of makes a little more sense to put it under 3 electeds instead of 1.
And I think too, I know we're not talking about that item, but on item 9 we talked about potential another system coming into play that would have a county role that is driven through GIS that would, I think, support even that movement rather than fall back in us. But if that's the wishes of the county, I mean, I would do that until you guys feel sufficient time to move. I think we just had that discussion before that we felt.
I think it's and I get where you're coming from, and we had all kinds of problems because we moved too fast, probably on the pretrial services stuff. But this being internal to internal, and it just getting the payroll on, I mean, they can all work together and just, if they're in the assessor space for 3 or 4 extra days, I mean, or even into the, January 4th or whatever the date is, I think they can all work together and we don't have to have a clean, this has to be done here. It's just getting them over onto the other payroll and beginning those.
January 15th, if you're still there, I'll kick you out.
Well, Dane, if space and desks or anything are an issue in your department, is engineering a better option? Just in terms of logistically?
Well, I don't know. They've got some of that space over in their area, but if that's what it is, and we just have to have the space, I'm sure even if they work for MIS, they could work in. If there's area in engineering for them to sit and do their work, they could be an MIS employee and sit down there. I mean, we can probably find some space.
You just said something interesting. So January 15th, I'm probably kind of joking, but you need his space, essentially, is that what you're telling us? Like, oh, you don't, okay, you're just messing around, okay.
No, I've already have staff in place that will do the assessment work, because he's not doing that at this point.
I didn't know if maybe you needed his space for the
Gabe
replacement.
Gabe has not been doing that the whole year. He's been doing other stuff.
I won't be doing assessment work, but we still will be working with the assessor's office. Just stating that, I don't want.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you guys are gonna be a power user of our GIS department, just because that's the backbone of a lot of the stuff that you do, but other people are gonna be power users as well.
Correct. Yeah, all the authorization in that group or that channel. Yeah. Just as if it does now. When I need something, I'll just walk back to him wherever he is. If he's still there, I'll go back and say we need this or we need that.
All right, anybody got anything?
All right, then I would move that BET recommended the budget board transferring $88,750 from general fund reserve to MIS for the second half of the fiscal year to cover personnel expenses we've discussed, and they would not need to, BOCC would need to do the second part of that question. So that's,
I think that's
the most moving that. Then that would facilitate something from your end to designate it.
Yeah, we can get
more
something
deeper than that.
We can get something on the OCC. Okay.
On your motion, is it kind of one-time monies or ongoing?
ongoing.
What's our balance for ongoing?
Before this move, 1,582. This is $1,582,999.20.
Yeah. Okay, Cassie wanted some clarification. My understanding is the motion is to recommend the budget board to transfer $88,750 from general fund reserve to the MIS general fund budget to pay for the second half of the year's employee expense for GIS staff. And that was the second.
Okay.
Is that good? Yeah. All right.
Now, do we,
Hang on,
that's a big assumption by getting to the end of the year, because if BOCC doesn't approve that and they stay where they are, then they have to come, then the budget board had to come back and instead of sending it to MIS, have to send it to the assessor. So should the motion be contingent upon decision made by the BOCC of whether to move GIS or not?
Yeah, you can do that. Contingent on BOCC's approval of accepting the GIS staff into a BOCC department.
Okay. Not the, your number, what Marcy's telling me, that did not include a 2.5%. That was just the flat number that we had.
Well, you'll be a new employee, so.
So there is going to be additional.
Commissioner Davidson, did you?
I just don't think you ought to say a department unless we're creating a new department. If you want to create a new department head salaries.
No, we're not.
No,
We're not looking
no.
at that. We're looking at putting it into MIS.
I would say, well,
Are you okay with that movement?
I don't really think, well, based on discussions in here, I think all three commissioners' offices are represented in here. I don't think there's gonna be much heartburn about moving them into MIS. If so, I would think that we would have had that come up.
That 88 seconds, he's gonna include help and
Help and
like,
training.
just over that.
Right.
So I need
Marcy, do you have
to
the
amend
numbers?
my motion to a different figure. So,
That's the number that Paul just showed.
Is that what on top of fringe though? It should just be
Well,
on
this
top
is
of
just the
salary.
2.5% salary plus the 2.5.
So what's the total new number?
So that's 99.68.75.
Say it again.
88.
So just
Second
do,
8870 was from the budget.
I still didn't get
I
that.
know, is it salary
Oh,
and
but the-
fringe?
You can't include that.
That's just salary.
You don't
Oh,
need stuff for fringe?
I didn't figure, no, I didn't figure the fringe.
So the 88,000 doesn't include FICA or health? The 88,000 doesn't include FICA or health?
That's just salary.
Any idea what benefits they will take? I mean, figure it out pretty quick.
well, but the insurance was already pre-funded at the beginning of the year.
Only 6 months.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
Not if you was at a reason.
yeah, plus if there's a rebound, yeah. We need to add another 17,439 for fringe, and whatever the health is, so.
We could just do the 19.65.
Yeah.
And we could do 2.5 on the 88,750 and then add it all together, and then if they come up short.
So that's just salary. Less than 2.5.
You said the health is, they're on single. I get 119,332.11.
You get one?
119,332.11. I mean, just so I could walk this number back out loud, so we can agree. 88,750 times 1.025, that gets us to 90,968.75. Okay, multiply that times the FICA and retirement, so 1.1965. That gets us to 108,844.11. Then adding the health insurance, what's it, 874 for single, right? 874. One twice.
Yes.
Okay, so that times 2 times 6.
Yep.
That's 10,488.
10.4.
488 plus 108.
So I need to modify my motion for the amount we recommend transferring it. It's $119,332.11.
Okay, and who was the second on that? Was there a second?
I don't think there was.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. You have a second? All those in favor
Or
say
did
aye.
we do it as a contingent thing or not?
Yes.
I have the contingency written.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Item number 8, discussion possible action regarding budget approval for team for the second half of fiscal year 24-25. Discussion may include, but not limited to, any changes related to MOUs, contracts, budgets, funding, personnel duties, policies, and procedures. Paul, you're up. You're up.
I mean, this is something that just, there is we determined that based on a meeting we had the other day, that the shortfall was primarily due to the NCICs. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, when team presented their budget, it was assumed that that would include NCICs, but it did not include that in your budget of the 1.35, whatever it was. Correct.
So the budget that we presented never included the NCIC checks. As Ms. Bahena explained in the meeting that we had, she told the budget board and the Board of County Commissioners that team could not do the NCIC checks because we were not law enforcement. We were asked to present a budget at that time. We presented a budget for 1.35 million. And our budget, our original budget, Mr. Foster, which I think I emailed, never included the NCIC personnel.
Correct. Anybody wants to see that? That's the budget that was emailed to me. You want to take a look at that?
This, Mr. Chair, if I may, this is the budget that we originally presented in late June, early July, that the Board of County Commissioners actually approved. But then it later determined that the money for the contract, was not encumbered. And a decision was made by the budget board to come back and fund only half of this contract, for the first 6 months of the fiscal year at $675,000.
Correct.
Which is what happened, and then wait for the estimation or the actual numbers for county government to see if there was going to be room in the budget based on what was actually going to be available to fund the second half of the fiscal year. We're not asking for more than the 1.35, but just the second half of the 1.35, which
I think we're playing on the same field again.
Yeah, I had an opportunity, just real quick, to talk to Joe about this quite extensively. I know he won't be able to vote.
Your Joe.
Later on. Yes, my Joe. District 1's Joe, I should say. Joe. So I talked to him. Of course, he won't vote on budget board, but he wanted me to express the District 1 viewpoint in here, and then that viewpoint will, I'm sure, be carried forward in any VOCC discussions related to contracts or whatever. But he wanted me to get him some numbers. He wanted to look at the overall expense of the program, regardless of the pieces of the program and who was doing the pieces of the program, just what the cost of the program was and what it was budgeted at going into the fiscal year, which we had talked about those numbers in here. Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall that number to be $1,362,503 was the overall budget when you add in all of the accounts.
I'm showing 1,612,986.39, but that included the IT for the DA of 42.4. So that might be where.
Yeah. So
the 1,362,000. That's the amount that was the total budget.
That's what I'm talking about.
The county's total budget.
No, that's
Okay,
what I'm
I'm sorry.
talking
I
about.
thought you were asking
Yeah.
about all the contracts.
No.
Yes,
the
that is
total,
correct.
the
1,362,000.
anticipated total expense for providing everything necessary for a pretrial program was $1,362,503.
Right.
So he wanted that number, and then he wanted to know what the expenses for the individual pieces are since we broke it out to get to the overall cost of the program. The piece for GPS monitoring for the one individual that's providing GPS for some special circumstances was $75,279.70, which was part of the old program, and that was the expense in the old program. And then the expense of pulling NCICs, which were associated with the old program and are still needed for the new program, and those expenses are $145,752. So then when you take those two numbers out of the 1,362, that leaves the amount for the supervision piece of pretrial services. That's $1,141,471.30.
Say again.
$1,141,471.30. Looking at, since we have kind of three pieces right now, we got the DA's office doing part, the criminal justice authority doing part, and a contract provider doing part. Those were all together before, so looking, and those expenses were the same in there. So you back those expenses out, what's left would be what our contract provider is doing, because they're not doing the piece that the DA is doing. They're not doing the piece that the Criminal Justice Authority is doing. So what's left is the supervisory fees. So that's the $1,141,471.30. The District 1 viewpoint from Joe that he wanted me to make sure and state and make clear is that he is willing to be at that dollar amount, but not a penny over. He said we were told that it was going to be less, but he can live with the same expenses before, but he is not supportive of increasing any over that. So looking at that, the $1,141,471.30, we had a 6-month contract. I believe that was Miranda. Go ahead.
675, 457, 47.
47. Okay. Yeah, that's the number that I had.
671,
675, 457, 47. So you subtract that number from the 1.41 million, leaves an amount left for supervisory expense of $466,013.83.
And that's for what?
The second, that what's left for the second.
That's what's would be left for the supervisory. So,
But that's not, there, one thing I think is worth not losing track of here is that we're double paying for a software program.
Well, that's over
So-
$200,000 short of what the second half of that contract would be.
it's been the first half of the contract, you know, if you wanted to divide them in half, it would have been half of the 1.141 million. But the first 6 months was more than half of that. So I'm just saying that is, he's looked at these numbers. I've had conversations with him. I will say he is frustrated, might be the churched up term, about the whole process, how fast it went.
Well, aren't we all?
Brandy.
I mean, come on.
I don't know if we all are or not,
I mean,
to be honest.
it's an unfortunate situation that we obviously can't rectify. We've had how many
Well, but we
conversations
can,
about it?
rectify it now. If you look at the contract that's on for BOCC tomorrow, we didn't fix any of the things that should have been fixed. We're reduplicating some of the issues that should have been fixed.
You mean specifically with the team contract?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
what?
Well, like, I'm not going to get into that here because this is talking about numbers and not necessarily the contract provisions. Those I'm sure Joe will lay out pretty clearly tomorrow in the BOCC meeting, because I don't know specifically what all issues he has, but I know there are some. You know, just looking at other contracts that we have with other contract providers here in the county that are providing services, some of the insurance statements, some of the different things that we have in all of these other contracts that are nowhere found in that contract. So want to make sure that we're not jumping the gun and moving faster than we should be and making, with good intentions, making decisions that have unintended consequences.
The problem is right now, making no decision is, at this point, intended significant consequences
Yes.
because they're not unknown. So, I mean, if we do nothing, we're intentionally
we could
suffering the consequences of having these services evaporate.
Or we could negotiate a 2-month contract or a 3-month contract that we still have funding for. I mean, we've got $466,000 to be able to give us some more time to figure it out. I mean, I think
it was figured out. I think it just never was executed. I talked to 3 trust members and then their finance person. Not asking them to agree, but I was asking them, is anybody aware of any problem with you all picking up the tab for the 1 DA employee and the employees that we're funding to them through an MOU. And they said, as long as we have the money, they had no fundamental problem with it. So I thought last month we were going to have somebody go ask them that had some portfolio that could actually, that kind of covered the BET, the budget board, the OCC, and the trust, sort that out. We know that there is plenty of money to cover the 5 or 6 FTEs that we're talking about through the unfunded position or the funded positions they haven't filled. It's just a simple process of asking them the question, getting their agreement, which we're now a month down the road. They'll probably have to have a trust meeting about that. We'll modify the contract, come back and have budget board. I mean, there really wouldn't be, other than the budget board redirecting where the funds go, we would not be having any additional funding from the county side. The way I understand it, and then we'd have to modify the MOUs through the BOCC.
Yeah. Now, Paul was gonna have that conversation with the trust. Paul, did you have the conversation with him?
No, I was asked for Commissioner Davidson to have that conversation with him.
Okay.
I'm a little confused because I know at one point, us three were triangulated in an email. What was the purpose of that? I mean,
Just essentially to figure out if there were any efforts being duplicated as far as the NCICs
Okay.
and then those summer reports and yada yada, was the first aspect of it, was to get clarity on that. But then also, we had broached the subject of maybe having, them absorb the cost of their contract as well as the cost of the DA's contract, so we can then use that money to finish up tiers.
I mean, kind of to Jason's point though, I mean, unless there's other people that agree with Cody, I mean, there's 8 votes here. I mean, I am in the same position that Cody's in. I mean, I'm only gonna be able to vote for the original amount that was provided to Grant and his team for an all-in cost. That's, I mean, and unfortunately, I mean, that's where I was. I sat for the sheriff during the original budget board and I made the claim. I've also expressed my concerns in here about the direction that it happened and how things maneuvered themselves into different positions. But the bottom line is, I mean, at this point, I'm only going to be able to vote for whatever the all-in cost is of the 1.3 and change. So whatever that looks like. I mean, that's only 2 votes. I mean, I don't know that it's.
Well, it's 3 at least, but to me, we're climbing a tree to make this harder than it needs to be. When just standing on the ground and just going and doing what the obvious thing is, just needs to happen. But I don't.
Well, I think that's how this kind of got back to the BET is that
Yes.
the contract was signed and done, and then it was decided that it comes back to BET to try to find a revenue source to pay.
So that's when the thing that was going to cost less money cost more money.
Yes, and
That I can't understand.
I only have one little question that's for District 2 is when that happened, Jessica came to our office and said that there was going to be an expectation of shortage of funds to pay that contract. But District 2 had a position that they would be willing to fill and use that revenue to help offset that loss. I don't know if
I
that
have
has
no
changed
knowledge
or
of
not.
that at all.
Okay.
So
You
if
have
you're
to ask
prepared
Jessica.
to only, or Joe suggests that the only thing to do is the 4, whatever number you gave, 400 and some odd thousand, and you're prepared, and that pretty much pays for 4 of the remaining 6 months.
That amount gets us to the 1.362 million.
Right, I understand. So that basically funds them for another 4 months out of 6. What happens at the end of the 4 months?
That was the exact question.
That's been the problem all year.
But that's where we're going to have to figure something out, because we can't just sit here and, if you've got elected officials that say, we were told it was going to be no more than the 1.362, but now all of a sudden it is more than the 1.362, then we have to reassess. Do we need to look at doing it in-house again? Do we need to send it out for RFPs? What do we need to do moving forward? But we can't just say, well, we got a provider that says it's going to cost this amount, and that just forces us to do that. No, there are other options. I'm not saying whether we should get there or not. I'm just saying that my boss gave me marching orders, and he is not willing to go above the $1,362,503.
Well, I know
Period.
in the meetings that we've had with the DA's office, they're concerned that we have 700 individuals that are under surveillance, they're being watched or held. And that can't just turn a switch and expect us to be able to change that. So at some point, maybe we got to really address something in a long-term fix.
And that's where I thought we were.
I would say the Court Services Advisory Board, as the chairman, we did recommend that the full contract, the remaining 6-month contract of the $675,457.47. We are recommending that that contract be signed by the BOCC tomorrow.
The problem is it can't because there's no money that is,
Correct.
there's not sufficient funds to encumber, which is why the first contract for the full year wasn't worth the paper it was written on, because there was never any money behind it. You can't do that.
Correct, and in our discussion, we were recommending that BET budget board come up with that amount. As he expressed, the district attorney, we have 700 people out on pretrial release. Those individuals cannot go unsupervised and those types of things. And that original contract was signed for 12 months. Team was told come up with a budget in this amount. That has changed. They're sticking to the budget for the 12 months, just no one took out these amounts for NCIC and those types of things. I will say that the individuals doing NCIC, I know for several months, some of those positions weren't filled. I don't know what happened to that money, but I will say the whole time we've been getting around 20 summaries a day, and that hasn't changed whether there were 2 employees or 5 employees. That number hasn't changed, and I will say that the jail's being saved significant money, medical costs, all those things by these individuals being out rather than in the county jail.
I think I'm in complete agreement, several of us are, that the contract be fully funded for the whole year at the originally agreed to negotiated budget. I'm curious why your group thought it was important that the money should come from the county and not from any other source of available funds.
I think when looking at it, we knew that the individuals that are getting out, whether it be, I know I was here at the last meeting, we talked about that money coming from potentially the jail and those types of things because of the positions. But I mean, at the end of the day, the county's being saved money with all those individuals being out rather than in. And again, the medical savings and all those things and the positions they have open that aren't filled. We do think that the money could come from there.
Well, and that's kind of where,
because the county isn't saving money. You're asking us for additional money.
right. And
So that's the opposite
and
of saving money.
Yes, that's exactly where I'm coming from.
frustration. I do.
Because if BOCC would have known up front that this program is going to cost minimum $300,000 more than what it was before, they may have made a different decision and said, we're going to keep it in-house because we were getting out the folks, we were supervising them, we were providing the pretrial service program at a particular expense. But when BOCC was told that we can still have a pretrial services program, but we can have all kinds of extra services for these folks while they're out, and it's not going to cost us any more, it's actually going to be a savings, then BOCC, of course, that's great. We can get more services for our folks and we can save taxpayer dollars. But now we're sitting here in a situation to where we're not saving taxpayer dollars. We're not even at the same dollar amount we were before. We're going to have to be putting out money, extra money for the same program that we had before. Now, there are additional services. I do get that. But BOCC, if they would have been presented with this initially that said, hey, we can take over the program and have the same number of folks out that you guys have, but we're going to be able to provide all these additional services, and it's going to cost you an additional $300,000 for us to be able to provide these extra services, BOCC may or may not have agreed to that.
Well, I think a couple of things weren't taken into account. So first of all,
And Bridget, I've had conversations with you, and you've told me the same thing, that you were under the impression that it was going to be less expensive, that the dollar amount was going to be less, that you had heard the same thing.
absolutely, and I do think it will be. I think we're failing to take into account a couple of things. So conditional bond and court services had a whole lot of individuals out on just OR bonds. Now, when we did the switch in services, every single person is getting UAs and all these things to their routine.
whenever we switched, the district attorney wanted them supervised, but we're trying to get to this place where we have these individuals on OR bonds. Right now, every single individual is getting UAs and using all these resources. That's money that teams having to pay for every single person to have all these things. We know that over-treating individuals doesn't necessarily make the crime go down, but this is a situation we're in right now. I just had a meeting with the district attorney and some of the judges the other day regarding that. So overall, do I think a lot of these people can be switched to OR bonds and not be using those UAs and all those resources? I do. There are also, the GPS is being duplicated, so I don't think anybody thought that through, but there are all these supervisory services that I do think will be switched to OR bond.
But, okay, so we increased the budget at $300,000. Let's say budget board comes up with that. And it's costing more. But then what you're saying is in the long run, it's going to cost less. So are you anticipating us to get a contract in the future that's going to be a reduction of the $300,000? Because I don't recall seeing contracts come hardly ever before us that are reduction in amounts requested.
I do think that once the program no longer goes on, we all know when the program starts, just like with the 781, at the beginning, there's more startup cost. And so I do anticipate that if a lot of those individuals are switched to OR bonds, then we figure out ways to do savings on UAs. I will also say things that weren't taken into account is when court services was in the Capitol Investors Building, the county janitorial services and all these things were coming out of facilities and different
Yeah, but that's
areas.
not that much. I mean,
when you look at the cost of team of electricity and janitorial, and some of those things do add up. So there are a lot of services.
but a lot of that, they were in the same building that they were. That was part of the efficiencies of moving over. Because I will say, and we talked about this earlier, and Mr. Steele, Joe wanted me to mention if you want to come by and talk to him, he's absolutely open to having a conversation. He did want me to ask, prior to getting the contract with the county, I know you guys were providing this same type of service. And you had mentioned before that you guys had funding and budget of about $500,000 more. He wanted me to ask you if you can get us kind of an in-depth budget of what you had for your program before entering into the contract with the county versus what it looks like now. So that was one thing that he did.
And I want to make a request, slight modification what I said. It does cost less money. My frustration is that somehow with a program that does the right thing and saves money, the county has figured out a way to make it cost more money. I don't like that. I'm opposed to it. There is available funds within the bigger umbrella of the county resources put to criminal justice, specifically in funded but unfilled positions at the Criminal Justice Authority, the detention center, that has allowed them to accumulate a carryover of somewhere in the amount of $2 million or something crazy. So there's plenty of money to absorb 5 or 6 FTEs, and it does cost less money in terms of the programs. We've just figured out an interesting way to make it more expensive. I'm trying to figure out how do we realize the savings, and that is to pull available resources that are not being used, but to accumulate at the detention center to fund these very few positions. And it's a simple conversation that the county needs to have with the Criminal Justice Authority to say, are you good with it? The conversations I've had with at least 3 of the Criminal Justice Authority board members is that they don't have any kind of fundamental or philosophical problem with it as long as the money is there. It's a simple phone call or drive down the street or something to ask the simple question. It's just hard to believe that somebody could say that they don't have the money. I don't see it.
No, I mean, a couple things. I mean, the first thing is though, I mean, and I understand the perspective of getting the money from the jail, but I mean, you're a smart guy. I mean, whether you whether you find the money by panhandling on the street or you get it from another entity, the fact remains that it still costs more than originally was anticipated, regardless of where the money comes from. I mean, I understand where you're headed, but I mean, two, like I said a second ago, I mean, honestly, I'm a little bit confused. I mean, we got to this point because budget board was able to count to 5. So I mean, unless something's changed, I mean, if the votes are still there, why don't we just somebody make a motion and vote? I mean, just because Cody and I are no's doesn't mean that the other 5 that were already a yes in budget board aren't still going to be a yes. You see what I'm saying?
Well, here's the minutes for
Have them
the
all stationary back here.
county commissioner meeting minutes from the August 28th meeting. They voted to terminate the contract December 31st. There was a reason they did that. And as I recall, it's because they wanted to find a way to fund it without tapping into county resources directly or the reserve fund to do it, that there was other options. And I thought that's why we were handed the task of trying to sort it out. I thought we'd come up with a pretty reasonable approach to go ask for latent resources that we've already allocated to the criminal justice apparatus of the county to fund a handful of positions. And you're right about my intentional oratorical oversight there, but
If I may, I'm going to be as succinct as I can, and I hope you'll hear my heart on this. I just want to say first and foremost, when team was approached to provide the services contained in the pretrial service program contract, we were as transparent as we know how to be. We said it would cost us $1.35 million to provide active supervision for 1,600 individuals over the course of 12 months. Now, the way that works is we only supervise an individual until the case is closed. So what that means is we supervise, actively supervise, and we have built a staff. And all of our positions are filled and working of between 700 and 800 individuals a month. Chair is right. There are three parts to this program now. It's the folks that are doing the NCIC checks inside the Oklahoma County Detention Center, the employee inside the district attorney's office, and team. I want to remind everybody that the contract that we have for pretrial services includes community supervision. Community service. It's the intake specialist for Shine and for anybody who is assigned to community service. That's in this contract. It's always been in this contract. That has not changed.
The intake specialist for Shine.
Shine should have our crew chiefs are billed from a different contract, but in this contract, and Paul, I'm sorry, Mr. Forster would have it. The intake specialist for community service, because not everybody goes to Shine.
Oh, for the other aspects of community service.
Well, yeah, it all goes through that intake specialist who determines if the person is capable to be on a Shine crew or if they need to do their community service at another contracted entity. But that's funded through this contract. It always has.
Mm-hmm.
The only Shine positions are the crew chiefs that are out every day working on the contracts. That has not changed. I just want to reiterate, there are three aspects to this contract. Two of the three aspects were fully funded for 12 months. One of the three aspects of this contract was only funded for 6 months, and that's us. I don't know why we're being treated differently, but we're being treated differently. And all of the shortfall, for whatever reason, or perceived shortfall, has to be taken out of our portion of that. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that that's right, and I don't know why it's happening. Mr. Nelson, I will tell you, in the meeting on August 28th, the decision was made to fully fund this contract, the first half of this contract, the first 6 months, because they wanted to wait until the actual numbers came in September to determine if they had enough resources, if the county had enough resources to then fully fund the remaining half of the contract. When we were asked what it would take for us to do this properly and according to the guidelines that we had been instructed to do this program, we gave the budget. Ms. Behenna, if she were here, she would tell you that she made it clear as that budget was being presented that the folks who do the NCIC checks could not be in that budget. That has not changed. We're not trying to hide anything. We're not trying to ask more for what we originally asked for. In fact, we're right on budget on what exactly we thought it would cost to do this program the way that we were instructed to do it. I will just stop there, but to tell you, however it comes, and that's your decision. If it comes from whatever entity, that's your decision.
But come January 1st, we would love the opportunity to continue to provide these services we have. There were some, with any transition, there were some kinks initially that we were able to work through with both the public defender and the district attorney. I think that we're improving every day. I know that we're improving every day, and so ultimately, I would just ask for any and all consideration that I have in hand. Like I'm sitting on super solid ground right now, is that the county would continue to fund the second half of this contract at the amount that was originally discussed and agreed to for this third component, which is the supervision and community service intake portion of pretrial.
So if we were to look at a different contract, 4 months, you just threw that in there. We're back here in 4 months, the same number. Yeah, that's, I'm guessing it was even a motion.
I only threw that out there as it doesn't have to be this or that. I mean, there's other considerations that could be.
So, I mean, I'm as frustrated as you are in the manner that this is kind of come about. I don't know how we fix it except forward.
Yeah.
Well, I have questions. I haven't had a chance. When you had mentioned the amount for the district attorney employee, what amount is that? I have something different, I think.
The 75 to 79.70.
I've got 73,919.45.
As the amount of that contract?
The swag number was 75 in my head.
I've got the.
Mike, you have those numbers we wrote.
What was the amount of that contract, Miranda?
I wrote that on last year's break.
The 75 to 79.70 is what we had mentioned in this meeting, in the meeting last time. So, but okay,
I'm just
so
going
we're
off that.
yeah, so we're
Okay.
919.45.
Then in your figure, Cody, you didn't include the 42,400.
I did not include that. And that
You
was,
did that by design, like.
no, I didn't have the exact dollar amount on that. That is, I was going to wrap back around to that and mention that is an expense that should be included in this. So we reduce that 466.
42,400 even. Mr. Steele, I've got notes that the original contract was 1,359,1494, but then you came back and said the full contract is now 1,321,463.25. And so the second 6 months would only be $646,005.78. So you had about a $30,000 decrease. Okay.
And,
I want us all to work on the right numbers when we're doing stuff.
and I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So if I may, at our last meeting in here, this is our fourth meeting now on this issue, so it would have been, I think, the last meeting. We were asked if there was anything that we could squeeze, like anything that we could squeeze down. And there's just no, I mean, the contract Paul has it. But what we did when I'm not the contract, now our budget, right, our original budget, I'm happy to get it, anybody not changed at all. But when we came back internally, there was an unfilled FTE for like the first 2 months. And so that accounted for that $29,000 roughly in change. And so we said that if we have to, like, I mean, if there's anything that, I mean, that's the best that we could do and not like be in danger of like risking services or accountability of public safety. So that's what we talked about at our last meeting. But then the advisory board, I was not in that meeting. I was in a meeting with Mr. Foster and with Mr. Stein. But in the advisory committee meeting, they recommended full funding, and I think the contract would be up to that amount. And I also just want to say
Up to what?
Up to 1.35, up to the full amount to honor the original contract. That's what they voted for. Up to, and I would just say this: we don't get paid in advance. So the way that this works, and I'm all for this. This is the right kind of accountability. At the end of every month, we submit an invoice. That invoice is reviewed and we're paid for the services rendered. I will give you my word, if we don't have to spend all of the 1.35, we will not spend all the 1.35. Everything is accounted for. We can't get paid unless it's a legitimate expense.
See, that was one of my questions back to the contract though, is a contract that's on for tomorrow. I don't know who put it on, but I mean, it was the advisory board, but I don't know who drafted the contract. But it was basically, this is a flat rate contract, which wouldn't require invoicing because this is a flat fee contract.
We have been.
I know you have. I know you have been, but I'm just saying the contract that's on for tomorrow, I believe it mentions a flat rate contract, which would not need invoicing. So I know you've been doing your invoices and send them over, and I really appreciate that. I'm just saying that I don't want to get into another situation rushing on a contract that doesn't line up with what I know you've been doing and what you would intend to continue to do and what we need to do, which is have invoicing for specific services. So
We're just, Mr. Chairman, we're just asking for the second half of the original contract to be funded so that we can continue to provide.
you had mentioned earlier that you were approached to run this program. Who had approached you on that? You remember?
Ms. Bahena was in on those conversations, Ms. Biffle was in on those conversations. I believe Commissioner Mon was in on those conversations initially, and that's where the genesis of the discussions started.
Okay.
I have one more question. Sorry to put you on the spot, Brandon. I know in 1260 we're paying, that's what we're paying the DA, but do you have any idea
How much?
about specifically in that 1260 after the that includes for tax. Okay.
Now, I will add that what Joe had mentioned that he would be willing to do is he's not, just to reiterate, willing to go above what the total cost of the program was before. Now, I don't know, I had mentioned the 466, it'd actually be 423, 613.83 when you take the IT amount out of it. If we do have the Criminal Justice Authority that says we'll pay, for X amount, I don't know where he would be on that because it's, is that a savings that we turn around and give to a contractor? Should we treat that as the savings that we thought we were going to get from the contract itself, to Brandon's point a minute ago, but all of that being said, we will need to come up with, just to meet the 423, 613, if we were doing that, we're going to need to probably transfer some money from reserve because the court services budget, the 1.362 beginning of the year had payouts that hit it, I'm sure, because of folks that left the county, and we had to have payouts that was not included in the budget. So whatever those dollar amounts are, we would need to transfer money to make available. Yeah. And I had talked to him about that, and he's fine, as far as that's concerned, allocating the additional dollars for those payouts, but not for anything else.
I will say that this contract that we did, it was made off of the original contract that was signed. The only thing that was changed is that we changed the dollar amount to only be half and made it reflect the 6 month, but everything else in the contract was as the initial contract was. It also does state here, Oklahoma County will continue to provide background investigations, including pulling NCIC reports. That was in the initial contract that was signed with Team, and I just want to make sure everyone's clear on what we're saying. Team signed a 12-month contract with the BOCC, just like all these other contracts were made with the detention center and with them. And now we're asking Team, hey, have you been able to save any money? Did you have any unfilled positions? I don't know if those same questions have been asked of the jail employees of the district attorney, because there's a reason why you never get to sign a contract and then at the very end, when it's 2 months till the contract's up, say, hey, we actually don't have that money or can't pay you. I mean, there's a reason why you just can't go back and contract one, undo a contract.
Well, Bridget,
the
we had the
contract
DA's
is
office in
nice.
here last time when we asked them, and then we had conversations around here, and District 3 was going to approach the Criminal Justice Authority to see if they could eat these expenses. So our group hasn't been focused, training or focus on one piece of this. We've had these other discussions.
And I've never suggested that we find the money for this from the team contract.
Right.
And opposed to it, I think they should be fully funded for the full year at the negotiated, budgeted, contracted original fee.
Absolutely. It was kind of just in response to, hey, only give them this amount, which wasn't in with the full amount. And so it's unfair to put that on team without saying we're not doing that to the jail contract employees running the NCICs. We're not doing that to the DA's office. Where I know Cody made a statement about Mr. Joe Blau and what he said. It's just we're not doing the same thing to the
But we
others.
are, that's what, or at least that's what I'm proposing. You know, Brandy mentioned this early on, that she thought it was unfair at the first meeting where it came to BET, that it was unfair to look at just taking it out of and fooling around with team.
Mhm.
And I think that's been the posture of BET since then, is to not get the money from there. That's why, I'll say it again, can we please, for the love of God, have somebody go across the street to the jail and ask the trust if they can cover these 5 or 6 FTEs and the corresponding expenses to at least just keep everything as it is today without charging that to the county's account. I think that can happen. It's just a simple conversation and a vote by the trust. I mean, I don't know what the exact amount is. We can talk about whether it's 56 cents or 57 cents. It doesn't matter a hill of beans until we know what's the plan for where the money can come from. I'm opposed to it coming out of county general reserve, and I will continue to be. I think there's more than enough money that we've already allocated to the criminal justice system. I mean, we can talk about whether it went to jail or the DA or whoever, but it's money to go to it's money that the county has put to the criminal justice system. We have this little pocket of money that's sitting in the jail for unfilled positions that have been funded. I don't know why we don't use that if they're willing to help us that way. And in non-binding conversations, I haven't received any pushback. I'm just saying, to me, that's the first thing to try. If we're not going to try that, and we're just going to come back here and have BOCC do something that forces the hand of the budget board, I just think that's a non-starter. It has nothing to do with you, Chris. I mean, I know you're in the middle of it, but it has nothing to do with you. You haven't done anything to cause it, in my opinion. So I'm still wondering why we don't have somebody. It sounds like there is some kind of opposition that has not been stated to asking the Criminal Justice Authority officially if they're willing to participate and let us amend the county to amend their MOU for them to absorb those costs. It's just an unstated opposition. I'm slow, but I'm finally getting to
correct, though, if they amended their MOU to $0, that doesn't cover all of the additional expenses, right?
If they're going to absorb, yeah, right.
What?
There's still a deficiency.
What?
Beyond the 145,000.
It's
What?
145,
The 73?
752, and then if you were gonna ask them to pick up the DA.
Yes, that's included.
19.
I think it was 75,279.
I thought we changed it to 73,919.
Yeah.
45.
That's 219,671.
Yeah, right. Right.
Jason, now I thought you reported to us that you were in contact with Chris and was asking him if they have the money available, and you hadn't.
Chris Sherman?
Mhm.
He had not given me a specific number, but then we went and reviewed it and they have the money. I mean,
And he agreed that they have the money?
well, he hasn't disagreed yet. I know they have the money. I mean, he's not come back to me after those conversations. We know they have the money, just have the conversation. I mean, I'm not asking Chris to sign something.
No, not signed,
Yeah.
not signed. You last said you're waiting to hear back from him. Is
Right,
that-
and I have, and to my knowledge, I'll go back and check email, but I don't think I missed anything. He thought that the money was there, but he didn't want to be on record saying that without having gone back and looked. I haven't heard anything, so I'm assuming that there was no problem.
What was that number, Christy, that you gave, taking the last 6 months of both of those?
The two MOUs?
Yes.
219,671.45.
Mr. Chair, does that include the 45,000 for the software?
42,400, yeah.
Oh, I didn't include that.
You did?
We've already paid that.
Yeah, I thought that was included in those numbers.
I added 145,752 for the 3 employees at CJA and 73,919.45 for the DA.
Okay, then, no,
I
it
just
does
didn't
not
include-
include it, so we need to include that, 42,400. Because we've got to look at the expenses going into the next fiscal year as well. We can't just look at, oh, the trust is willing to absorb whether it's $219,000 or $260,000 this fiscal year, but what about next fiscal year? If they say no, we're right back here having this exact same conversation.
I know, but let's ask them so we know whether we need to continue to have the same conversation. We just keep having the same conversation and never ask anybody officially. I mean, I don't understand why we're not willing to ask them the obvious question.
I think there just needs to be solutions for, that's great if that plan works, but if they say no, then also is there an alternative? Because that's the problem, is a business signs a contract and then of course no one wants to get money back. Of course no one wants to do that. But here we have where the DA's office and the jail, if they say, no, we don't want to do that, then we have team and all these people out on pretrial release. So what's the solution? Because it seems team is the one suffering the consequences here when, the jail can simply say, no, contract has to be enforced. And then what's our solution to the team issue and all these people being out? I think that's the huge thing that we're just worried about what's happening, because these are people's lives who have jobs who are worrying about this and depending on it. And so we just need a solution.
Maybe instead of abolishing the jail trust, we need to abolish the budget board. At this point, that'd be my recommendation. Because
You
if we're just
apparently
gonna have
weren't
the
here until you
BOCC go
heard
do
us.
things and force the hand of the budget board, then what's the point?
Do what?
Christy, I want to go back to the total, because I know for the last 6 months of that contract, what is that total amount? Because I know you had mentioned a 675 number and then also a 646 number.
Well, and I was right. The 675 was half of the original. So basically it's the same for the first.
So that is the ask for the second.
But they stood in here and said,
57.
they stood in here and said that they would only need for the second 6 months 646,0578.
It's 675, 457, 47. And the question was asked, is there any money of that has not been used? And Chris said if he was squeezing really tight, there was a position that I think was open for 2 months. And so there was a little extra money. Of course, that's undoing the initial contract and doing that, but he was trying to see where money could be squeezed out. Or if
There's
there
only
could be any
one contract in place. It supersedes the original.
Correct. That's the problem, and that's the problem
And
with-
it was posed, we can go back and look, but it was posed as the full contract now is 1,321,463.25. We would only need for second 6 months the 646,005.78.
Well,
So I thought there was working together a little bit to get where we need to get to take care of the people that are out there. But
when I
the fact that
I think
we
team
can't scrub a budget at this point,
and whoever drafted the contract that's on BOCC tomorrow, the purpose says, actually says the papoose, I think is what it says, of this is to solely amend the agreement from 12 months to 6 months, right? Is that what it says?
I believe this is the contract that was previously signed, and the district attorney's office just amended the amount down to half of what it would have been.
But the contract was amended. The last time in August, late August, the contract was amended from 12 months down to 6 months. That's what happened. What's on tomorrow's says the purpose of this is to amend from 12 months down to 6 months. It's already a 6-month contract. It's not a 12-month contract. There's all kinds of issues. That's what I was talking about. I mean, we're just slamming stuff through without actually reading.
We need a new 6-month contract to finish up this
Yes.
year. My proposal and hope is that we get it where it's fully funded at the originally negotiated amount. The question still remains, where do you get that money? A big portion of it is already funded. We need to get the rest of it. I think there's a simple place to go to get the rest of it. I don't know if we vote now to see if there's some kind of opposition to asking the Criminal Justice Authority to cover the difference.
I'm totally on board with
Yeah,
that.
I'm not opposed to asking now. I don't know where, if
We gotta
that will
move fast.
change our office's viewpoint because the overall expense didn't go down, but the individual pieces went up in areas. I don't know because I didn't have that specific conversation. So I want to say that I'm not opposed to having a conversation to see if they would be able to do that. I think we should have that conversation. I don't know whether that answer will change my office's viewpoint or not.
Let me clarify it. So your office's viewpoint, I don't know how to word this where it doesn't sound like I'm trying to put words in your or Joe's mouth, but do I understand it to mean that you would only believe there is a savings if we end up paying less than the originally fully negotiated amount to team?
I didn't follow
Say
that.
that again.
If it's Mr. Blau's position that he would not support something that doesn't represent a savings, do I understand from that the only way to realize savings is to pay team less than what the original negotiated full annual amount
I don't
is?
know that that's the case. All I know is he wanted to know what the overall budget was for court services for the pretrial program before we made any change. And then he said, okay, we have pieces that were all in one thing that we've broken out. So what are the expenses for all of those individual pieces? And you've got the GPS monitoring at the DA's office was in the old program. It's in the new program, but it's, in its own place, but it's not a new thing. We had that expense before. So our old plan was paying $73,000, $75,000, whatever that dollar amount is for that piece. We were paying employees to run NCICs. What was the expense on our program to run those NCICs? We just took those expenses and passed it on to the jail trust so you can just use that contract because that's what they did. They just looked at those salaries. I think they actually underestimated what those salaries are is what it appeared to me.
Well, here are the MOUs for 3 positions and they're up to 5. So
Yeah.
fully funding 2 of them.
So those 2 pieces were costs of the program. So if you look at our old program and you say, okay, well, let's take out that GPS monitoring for the one person that's doing the specialized monitoring. Let's take out the NCIC. The rest of everything that the county was paying, the county's pretrial program, was for everything else. And our contract provider is now doing everything else. So the everything else should cost what we were paying for the everything else, which is the 1.141 minus the IT amount, the 42,400. So basically $1.1 million is what the everything else amount was for. So that's the direction that I've been given. Now, if we can see savings from, the jail paying for part of this, that may be amicable to our office. I don't know because I did not have that specific conversation because I had heard that those conversations hadn't happened. I thought they were going to happen, but I thought that it was determined that it wasn't going to happen. So I didn't have that conversation with him about that. I'm happy to have that conversation and see where we would be. I hope what I said made sense.
I mean, I think the value for the team contract. So you're saying it should really be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.1 million, but it's not, the fully negotiated amount was about 1.3.
Based on the numbers that we were looking at, the pieces that we used to do that they're doing now cost us $1.1 million to do those pieces.
But I think that they're doing more than those pieces.
Well, they might be.
Because when court services was doing it, they were not doing it towards trying to meet accreditation standards.
Well, yeah.
But the contract does want the team to meet accreditation standards, so there is an additional burden, and that may be others, maybe that's the only one that was placed on them. I hear what you're saying, that that's not, and so, I mean, so do we renegotiate the contract with team for the second half of the fiscal year, but remove some of the components that have been in there historically where they don't have to meet?
That was the full 23, 24. When we had it. That was the estimated 24, 25.
Right.
Yeah, providing that info.
Yeah, but there was other, and this shows an estimated amount of 1.205 million, but there was some special revenue accounts
Yes.
as
Special
well.
revenue.
So
We added.
when I'm showing the 1,362,000, the reason why it's higher than this 1.2 million is because we're utilizing some of the special revenue
out of
accounts.
1260.
Now, that gets back to the other conversation about we had revenue coming in that was helping pay for some of this that is no longer coming in.
Yeah, we used to bill out the GPS fees. 1 year, 23, 24, we brought in 47,000 just over, and 22, 23 over 85,000, and we've lost that.
And I don't know the total amount the district attorney's office is receiving from the individuals who post bond. Those are the individuals through the DA's office, and so they are receiving revenue, and I do know that has been put into an account, but I don't know what amounts those are. I think it's just sitting in an account.
Yeah, but it's not the.
It's about $4,000 that
Yeah.
came in, and we put it in 1260, and we
Yeah,
said we
4,000
continue
in
in
like 6
1260.
months.
Right,
Because the majority of those fees were not on when our pretrial services, when the county's pretrial services program was operating in the county. The majority of those revenue dollars that were coming in weren't from the folks that Kathy Taylor was supervising. It was other.
And I will say that the contract with team does say they have to follow best practices, and best practices for people in the treatment courts and things like that on ankle monitors does say that we're not supposed to take money from them. And so I will say that a lot of money that court services was getting from UAs, for example, I had clients who didn't have $20 to go take a UA, and so they would fail and they would be put back in jail. So those are individuals that are able to stay out now through team. And again, when court services was doing this, team is providing a whole lot of services, transportation, health. They have AA meetings, everything on site that social services was supposed to be doing before, but there wasn't really people weren't getting.
Well, and absolutely. I mean, we had 2 folks coming over from our social services department to try to fill some holes. Their team is providing a lot more than what we were providing. I'm not saying that they're not. What I'm saying though is when BOCC was approached with this, it was the assumption that these services were something that we were not able to provide before. And if we got a contract provider that can add to what we're doing and it not cost us anymore, then absolutely it's a no-brainer. Let's do this. If they would have known that it was going to cost more, the decision, I'm not saying it would have been different. I'm saying it could have been different. That's the situation we're in now. Now we know that it costs more for the other services, Now it's how do we pay for it, and are we willing to pay for the extra services? I'm not a decision maker as far as that goes, so I can't say one way or the other without me. I'm just saying that it's a different scenario and situation that we're talking about right now than we were talking about pre-July when we thought that we were going to have all of this and it was going to be less.
I have one. Oh, go ahead, Mary.
I was just gonna ask Miranda, not to put you on the spot or
But we
anything.
will.
Do you have an estimated amount of available funds in the, court services general fund that is available to be encumbered?
I can go with numbers for you. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't want to guess, but I can run them.
If you don't mind, I think that would be useful to see what funds are currently available in that account.
Brandy, did you just want the general fund or did you want all of those?
I was gonna
accounts?
Yeah,
just
thank
in case.
you.
Thank you.
Right. I know she said 4,000 and 1260. I think 1290 was purely shine to pull from.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Steele, can I ask a question? In this initial budget, when you guys took over, I know there was some expenditures that you may not have next year, like the whole new software system. Do you have a rough idea of like those ones set up when you bought the software?
Going into next year, how much less those costs would be the sort of cost? I don't off the top of my head, but I can ask our CFO right now if you can look at what we spent in those categories and see if I can get them there.
And then I was gonna ask what you're tracking the first 6 months in incentives
And incentives.
versus what you budgeted, the 30,000.
Oh, yeah, I can get those numbers.
So how about this? Are you guys,
We need to move, yeah.
can you guys,
got budget.
can we recess until 3:30? We got budget board coming up at 3. I want to discuss item 10 though, because it's on budget board. I wanted to be able to potentially have a recommendation from this group. So, Mr. Seal, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump just real quick. We got budget board here at 3 o'clock. I had asked for item number 10. BOCC is utilizing some ARPA revenue to be able to pay for indigent pharmacy services for folks in the community that need those services. It's a reimbursement process, and as we all know, if we pay for it out of a general fund account, those reimbursements will come in, but it'll come into county general and not go back into employee benefits. Our employee benefits, not the rollover account that we use to pay for our actual benefits. I didn't think it was appropriate for us to commingle those. So what I thought we could do is do a transfer from the current social services budget of $60,954.59 from social services into employee benefits, their regular general fund account, so that they can use those dollars as front money to front the expenses for those prescriptions. And then employee benefits would bill against the ARPA account to reimburse those expenses. And then we'll need to, some of this money will lapse because it's $30,000 for each of the next 2 fiscal years. So we'll have some this year, and then, so it'll lapse and we'll need to put some more in at the beginning of the year next year to be able to do this. But it was the cleanest and easiest way that I could come up with for us to be able to do this. So I wanted to bring it here and then get it there if we can, so we can start providing those services as soon as possible.
Do you know the total balance in that social services, that account?
I don't have that handy. It was a significant amount of money in there.
Okay.
I don't
In
have
the
it.
M&O.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We decided to hold some out for the pharmacy overall.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Chantel actually pulled the numbers for me, and I worked with her and Danielle at Accenture, and Chantel actually drafted this agenda item and asked me whether to put it under John's name, and I said she could just put it under my name. That's fine. So, but anyway,
I'll make a motion to recommend.
Okay, we got a motion, we have a second? Second. Okay, a motion, and a second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. I'll mention that over across the hall, I appreciate it, guys. Is there a motion to recess until 3:30?
Recess.
I won't be
3:30,
available.
reconvene in this room.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion, and a second to reconvene in this room at 3:30. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are in recess. That'll give Miranda a little bit of time to get that. So, too cold.
Yes, it is. I'm okay with that.
So what was
Miles,